Namaste and welcome once again to this course on Introduction to Basic Spoken Sanskrit. I sincerely hope that you have been using this opportunity to practice speaking the language along with friends. If not, inspire them, because the language only makes sense when you can converse in it and discuss with other people. So inspire them to also start learning simple things, use it for them, and then they will pick it up, because as you've realized by now, it's not really such a difficult language to learn. So today's lecture is lecture number 9 on the conjugation of basic verbs in the plural. We have already looked at the conjugation of basic verbs in the singular. So today, since we have been looking at the plural forms of nouns, pronouns and some simple verbs, I thought it would be a good idea to take you into the plural of verbs and see how they combine and can be used in daily contexts. So the objectives of this course is to learn, of this particular session in fact, is to learn to conjugate the oft used verbs in the plural for the main pronouns in the present tense and imperative. Then we will apply the verbs in a simple song that we've already looked at, but we'll bring it in the plural form. And then I will try and show to you the grid of pronouns for conjugating verbs. Sanskrit is a language which has several kind of grids. The grid for the nouns and how they are declined, and then we also have the grid for the verbs. So once you see that, it becomes very easy for the mind to then compute and use the correct forms for the verbs. But before we go on, I'd just like to do a brief revision of what we've looked at earlier. So we had looked at the plural of nouns. So if you had a masculine verb word ending with an which is purusha, many of them, purushaha, 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 purushaha. Similarly, a feminine word ending with an a, mahila, 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 mahilaha. A feminine ending with an e would become nadi, 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 nadyaha. Remember that? And then we had the neuter word, which is phalam. It's an ending word but gets the in the subject case. So phalam, 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 phalani. So along with that, we had also seen the verb to be conjugated in the plural form in the present tense. So there we had, for example, phalam, phalam, phalam asti, phalam, 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 phalani santi. Purushaha asti, purushaha santi. And then we had the question, how many? So kati phalani santi. How many? Pancha phalani santi. Uttamam. Pancha phalani santi. So if you see on the screen, we have asti becomes santi. Next we have the first person singular. So it is aham asmi, aham mahila asmi. So if there were many women standing here, we would say vayam mahilaha smaha, vayam mahilaha smaha. And then we had the tvam or the you informal. So tvam you chhatraha or chhatra if you're a male or a female, assi, and when you many students in front, it would be yam chhatraha stha, yam chhatraha stha. Now let's see how the verbs conjugate in the plural in the present tense. So the question is kim kurvanti. Let's have Piyush here, and I'll just demonstrate it to you and it becomes easier for you to understand. So Namaste.
Namaste.
Sarvam kushalam kim?
Sarvam kusalam.
Uttamam. So I will tell Piyush to do an action and then I will tell you the plural of that. So gacchati. Piyushaha kim karoti in the singular. Piyushaha kim karoti. And the answer is Piyushaha gacchati. Now let's get him back in. Piyushaha agacchati. Agacchati. Piyushaha kim karoti? Piyushaha agacchati. Remember that? Agacchati. Now, what if there were many people? We'll just imagine that Piyush has got many other friends along with him. So, we let Piyush go first. So Piyushaha gachati, gachati, and many of them going will be gachanti, gachanti. You see the n of numbers gets added into the word itself. Okay, so gachati becomes gachanti, agachati, agachanti, agachati, agachanti. Khadati, if there were many of them, it would be khadanti, khadati, khadanti. And if I had to ask the whole group, kim kurvanti, then it would be khadanti, khadanti. Next, pibati, pibati, purushaha pibanti, pibanti. Likhati, likhati, exactly, likhanti, likhati, likhanti. Vadati, pathati, pathati, pathanti, pathati, pathanti. Vadati, 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 bhavata nama?
Mama nama Piyushakanti palaha.
Vadati, many of them, vadanti, vadati, vadanti. Now just a small note, there might be a tendency to say badanti. There are certain regions like Bengal and Orissa, and there could be certain regions that normally don't distinguish between the v and the b. So this is a very clear vadanti. It's a v sound, okay? The tooth on the lip. So vadanti and vadati, vadanti. Kridati, kridati, kridanti, kridati, kridanti. Now, upavishati, upavishati, upavishanti, the whole lot of them. Upavishanti, uttishtati, uttishtanti, uttishtanti. And the question is, kim kurvanti? Got it? Astu, dhanyavada.
Dhanyavada.
So let's look at that on the screen. So you remember the plural for saha was te. So be it a masculine, feminine, neuter in the third person plural, or like saha, taha, tani, or the second person formal like bhavan or bhavati, like in the plural they become bhavantaha or bhavatyaha. All of them will get the form gachanti. Similarly, agachanti, pathanti, likhanti, pibanti, khadanti, vadanti, kridanti, upavishanti, uttishtanti. Yes, have you got a hang of that? Now let's move on. So what happens in the first person? So in the first person it is, before that it is aham karomi, I do. Aham karomi. And the question, supposing I had to ask myself, what do I do? Aham kim karomi? So when it becomes plural, you remember the plural of aham was vayam. It then becomes vayam kim kurmaha, kim kurmaha, karomi kurmaha. So the maha at the end is representative of the first person plural present tense. So if you look at the screen, we have kim kurmaha. So aham gachami, vayam gachamaha. Aham agachami, vayam, all of us, agachamaha. So what I recommend is, as you are listening to me and also trying to repeat after me, I suggest that you actually get up and do these actions, because then you're teaching your body itself the language. So aham gachami, vayam gachamaha. Aham agachami, vayam agachamaha. Aham khadami, vayam khadamaha, vayam khadamaha. Aham pibami. Try now. Very good. Vayam pibamaha. Aham लिखामि, वयं लिखामः. अहं पठामि, वयं पठामः. अहं वदामि, वयं वदामः. अहं क्रीडामि, वयं क्रीडामः. अहम् उपविशामि, वयम् उपविशामः. अहम् उत्तिष्ठामि, vayam uttishthamah. Uttamam. Now let's look at that how it is in the written form. So vayam gacchamaha, agacchamaha, patamaha, likhamaha, pibamaha, khadamaha, vadamaha, kridamaha, upavishamaha, uttishtamaha. Uttamam. So you've got a hang of that. Now let's look ahead. So we had done a song in the session of the singular conjugation of the verbs, which was aham pathami sanskritam, aham vadami sanskritam, aham likhami sanskritam, sadaiva sundaraksharam. Now we'll see the plural of that same song. So this is something that I've sort of introduced. You won't find this on the net or anywhere. I've just tried to make a simple form of the usage of the plural with a song that is already known. So, Vayam pathama sanskritam, Vayam vadama sanskritam, Vayam likhama sanskritam, Sadaiva sundaraksharam. Got that? Moving on. The second part. Vayam smaramah mataram, Vayam namamah mataram, Vayam bhajamah mataram, Sadaiva bhakti purvakam. Now, just one thing is that what you find out here with smaramah mataram, normally there is a rule of a sandhi there, and it should have technically become Vayam smaramo mataram, but in order to keep it clear for us, I have left it in the original form itself. Okay. So what I suggest is we'll do the song once together. Vayam pathamah sanskritam, Vayam vadamah sanskritam, Vayam likhamah sanskritam, Sadaiva sundaraksharam. Vayam smaramah mataram, Vayam namamah mataram, Vayam bhajamah mataram, Sadaiva bhakti purvakam. So I hope you got that song nicely now. Now let's look at what happens to the second person informal. So the singular of that is tvam, and the plural will become kim kurutha. So tvam kim karoshi becomes yuyam kim kurutha. Now tvam gacchasi, yuyam gachatha. Tvam agachasi, yuyam agachatha. Now you've noticed that I haven't put in the pronoun here, and again reminding you that because the verb tha, gachatha, agachatha ends with a tha, it is self-sufficient to explain to us that the noun or the pronoun accompanying this verb, it is the second person plural. So here we have gachatha, agachatha, pathatha, likhatha, pibatha, khadatha, khadatha, vadatha, kridatha, upavishatha, uttishtatha. Yeah? So tvam gacchasi becomes yuyam gachatha, and it goes along with all the other verbs. Now let's look at the other form that we had looked at while looking at the verbs in the singular form, and that is the imperative or the ajna or the lot lakara. So I'll request Piyush to come on stage once more on screen. So gachatu, gachatu. Now if there were many of them, I would say gachantu. Agachatu, agachantu. Calling everybody else. Agachantu. Now in your hearing of this plural of the lot, did you recognize the logic with that of the present tense? What was different between gachatu and gachantu? Yeah, it's the letter N or the sound N, which, like I was giving you a tip, could represent the numbers. Huh? So in this case, you can add the N of the numbers. So gachatu, gachantu, agachatu, agachantu, khadatu, khadantu, all of you, khadantu, pibatu, pibantu, likhatu, likhantu, patatu, pathantu, vadatu.
मम नाम पिजुषकन्ति पालः
Vadantu, great. Kridatu, kridantu, you got it. Upavishatu, uttamam, upavishantu. Uttishtatu, uttishtantu, uttamam. Dhanyavada. Now we have it written out here. So we have te, taha, tani, third person in the plural. And then we have the second person formal, which is bhavantaha, bhavatyaha, and gachantu, agachantu, pathantu, likhantu, pibantu, khadantu, vadantu, kridantu, upavishantu, uttishtantu. And again, what I have on the screen for you at the bottom is the U informal. So gacha was what we had last time. Gacha, go. Huh? And then now all of you, gachat. You see, in Sanskrit there is a very, let's say, there's a certain requirement to be very precise with the pronunciation. Your breath can change the entire meaning. So for example, here we have yuyam gachat. And you remember what we had seen in the present tense of the yuyam form. Do you recollect? So it was yuyam gacha tha. I'll just show it to you quickly on the screen. So here you can see it is gacha tha. And what we have here is gacha ta. When you say yuyam gacha tha with the breath, with an aspirated sound, it means you are going, you plural are going, or you go, because there is no difference between the simple present tense and the continuous, present continuous. So you are going or you go is yuyam gachatha with an aspirated sound. And now when we are just requesting or ordering all of you to do something, it will be gachata. You see how precise one needs to be with the pronunciation. Anyway, so just to give you another practice, let's say likhatha becomes likhata, pibatha, pibata, khadatha, khadata. You can see the difference in the effect it has on your being as well. So now let's look at the first person plural in the imperative. We have just looked at the first person singular in the imperative, and when you were saying I do, it was aham karomi. And now if you want to say let me do, it is karavani, uttamam. So now what happens in the plural case, in the plural form? So we have vayam kurmaha in the present tense, and in the imperative it becomes vayam karavama. So kurmaha in the first person plural imperative becomes karavama. Now let's see, there you have karavama, which means may we or let's do. So what are the different things we can do? Now if we want to go, there are different ways of saying the same thing. So you can say vayam gachamaha kim. So the kim makes it into a question and you're saying, so can we all go? may we go please. But then you can also, in the imperative, directly in the imperative say gacchama, which means let's go. So gacchamaha of the present tense becomes gacchama, where there is no aspirate or the visarga sound at the end. So in that change it becomes let's do something. So gacchamaha becomes gacchama. Agacchamaha, agacchama. Uttamam. Pathamaha, pathama. Uttamam. Likhamaha, likhama. Pibamaha, pibama. Khadamaha, khadama. Uttamam. Vadamaha, vadama. Kridamaha, to play. Kridama. Upavishamaha, upavishama. Uttishthamaha, uttishthama. Uttamam. So I hope you've got a hang of this now. It's very easy. The imperative is really easy. So if you know the present tense very well for the plural of the first person, all you need to do for the common words at least is to just remove the aspirated sound and you will get the plural for the imperative for the first person. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is to present to you the grid of the pronouns using which the verbs are conjugated. So I'll try and draw this out for you on a table and I'll try and do it as neatly as I can. So we have a grid here. So it is a grid actually of 3 by 3. So in the first one, on this column, I'll give you the different pronouns. So in Sanskrit, we start with the third person, which very paradoxically is actually called the Prathama Purusha. It's not, let's say, paradoxical. I'll try and just write that for you neatly once. Okay. So, Prathama Purusha, which literally means the first person, is actually the third person for the English. So, be sure that you are not confused there, alright. And then we have the second one, which is the second person, which is known as the Madhyama Purusha, which is the middle person. I mean, that's a literal translation of that. And then we have the first person or the Uttama Purusha, which literally means the excellent person. So the Sanskrit people were very smart. They kept the first person last, but they made it the excellent person. I mean, just a funny thing on that. So don't be confused regarding this Prathama Purusha of Sanskrit, which corresponds to the third person of the English language. And then the other grid that we have is this. It is the numbers. Okay. So first you have the singular, known as the Eka Vachanam. Then you have the dual case or the dual form, which is the, you guessed it, Dvivachanam. And then you have the plural, which is the Bahu. Oh yeah. Bahuvachanam. I hope you can figure out my writing. It's not exactly very neat here. So So ekavachanam is the singular, dvivachanam is the dual form, and bahuvachanam is the plural form. So when we have the third person, we also have the pronouns that we have already looked at, saha in the masculine, sa in the feminine, and tat in the neuter. And in the second person we've looked at the tvam, and in the first person we've looked at the aham, right? So now let's look at what happens in the verb. So do you remember, if we take on the verb now, if we take on the verb which is pat, the root form of the verb is pat. Alright. So now let's put that out here in each of these squares. It becomes patha with certain grammatical changes. Patha, 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 All right. Now let's see what happens to the endings. So let's see if you can recollect based on what we have seen thus far, what the endings would be. Yeah. So saha in the singular was in the present tense, patha ti, tvam patha si. Make sure you don't join it there. Pathasi, aham patha mi. Okay, and then here you have in the plural. So we've looked at the plural today. So what did pathati become? You add the numbers and it becomes pathanti. And here you add the number, the plural, it becomes pathatha. And then we have the plural of the first person, which was pathamaha. Lovely. I'll also write it out for you in the English transliteration, because there are many who don't really know the Sanskrit letters as yet. So it would definitely help to see the Sanskrit of it. I mean the English transliteration. Patha. I'll just write the basic first and then add the verb. Patha. Sorry. And then patha, patha, patha. Make sure that you put the dot below it, because if you have to put the dot below the T, because if you don't put the dot, then it becomes patha, and here we want patha. Okay, so patha, patha, patha. Oh, sorry, patha. I'm saying patha and writing pat. So patha, 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 patha everywhere. Okay, and now what happens, as we have seen, is that it becomes saha pathati, tvam pathasi, aham pathami. So saha pathati becomes te pathanti. Tvam pathasi becomes pathatha. You see, there's no dot going under there. And then aham pathami becomes pathamaha. All right, let's put the dot under there. That's it. Fine. So we've also at the same time looked at the pronouns. I'll just put the pronouns in for you for the plural so you know them correctly. So the pronouns are te, te, taha, tani, And another one that we also need to include, because we've looked at it earlier, is, so these are the third persons, and we have the you formal, which is bhavantaha and bhavatyaha. Got it? So this is the you or the second person formal. Got it? And here also we would need to add it, so I'll just squash it in there. Bhavan and bhavati. Okay, so that comes, all of this comes in together for the conjugation here. So this is the third person and this is the second formal. Okay, is that making sense for you now? And then here we have the plural here, which is yum. Yum, and here it is vayam. I'm not writing the English transliteration of that because it will just be too messy otherwise. So I suggest that you just fall back on the slides that we've looked at previously, and you would know exactly what these are transliterated as. And also more so because I want you to start becoming familiar with the sounds of the words rather than the written form initially. So this is the grid. As you can see, what has been left out is this entire dual portion. We have not touched upon that because this is a little more complicated, and what I will do is at the end of the lesson probably just give you the entire grid of all the verbs and all the declensions, etc. So in basic simple spoken Sanskrit, there are ways in which you can bypass the use of the pure dual form by saying different things. So instead of saying purushaha, two men, which would be purushau, you can say purushadvayam, which would make it a singular compound form. So purushadvayam asti, whereas here you would get a different form. And when we come to this, when we look at it at the end, I will explain the entire thing to you and it will be easier. But for now, it is sufficient for you to know this and to practice it as much as you can. So like in every session, I end with a subhashita or a beautiful saying. So this particular one I have chosen from the Bhagavad Gita, which utilizes what we have already learnt in today's session. So it says, Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha, na chainam kledayantyapo, na shoshayati marutaha. So like you can recognize the endings here, chindanti, shastrani, the plural, and then we also have dahati, pavakaha, and then na chainam kledayanti apoho. So the kledayanti apaha, apo is a sandhi form already of apaha, which means waters. So na kledayanti apaha becomes na kledayantyapo, or apaha, and then na kledayantyapo. Na shoshayati in the singular marutaha. So this particular verse was recited by Krishna himself in the battlefield when Arjuna was completely dejected and under depression, severe depression at the idea of killing his own people. And then Krishna tells him that, you think that you're killing all these people, but actually what are we? Who really are we? And we are this immortal soul. So what are the qualities of this immortal soul? In the second chapter, 23rd verse, he describes it. He says, Nainam chindanti shastrani. So na enam. So for this, to this, weapon, shastrani is weapons, chindanti, they cannot destroy them. Nainam dahati, dahati burn, pavakaha, fire also cannot burn it. Na chainam, na cha enam, together, so not for this. Kledayanti apaha, kledayanti means wet, apaha, wet or drench, apaha is waters, which is always in the plural form. And na shoshayati, shoshayati means to dry up. Who cannot dry it? The winds. Marutaha cannot dry it up. So the entire translation of this is, weapons cannot cleave it, nor the fire burn, nor do the waters drench it, nor the wind dry. And I'll just chant it for you. You repeat it once after me, and if we'd like, we can probably do it once together at the end. So, Nainam chindanti shastrani, Nainam dahati pavakaha, Na chainam kledayantyapo, Na shoshayati marutaha. Now let's look at that. Let's do it together now. Nainam chindanti shastrani, Nainam dahati pavakaha, Na chainam kledayantyapo, Na shoshayati marutaha. So what I'd like you to start appreciating is the fact that while we are learning basic spoken Sanskrit, the introduction to the grammar of the language already will permit you to start understanding some of these very great philosophical texts that are part of our literature. And slowly and steadily you will learn to understand more and more and get greater mastery over this language. But we start with baby steps with basic spoken Sanskrit. And like in every case, I'd like to end with a powerful quotation on Sanskrit and the heritage that is associated with Sanskrit. So this is a very significant statement by Henry David Thoreau. He says, "In the morning I bathe my intellect in the stupendous and cosmogonal philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, in comparison with which our modern world and its literature seems puny." So this literature that we have, and for which Sanskrit is the key, has touched the lives not only of millions and millions of Indians, but hundreds of great minds across the world. So I'll close by saying Punar Milamaha. Punar comes from Punaha or again. Milamaha, we'll meet. So Punar Milamaha, we'll meet again. And finally, Dhanyavadaha.